Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're pulling back the curtain on an organization we all think we know, the United Nations. We see its blue flag on the news, hear its name in political speeches, and associate it with peace, human rights, and global cooperation. But the story of how the UN came to be is far more complex, dramatic, and filled with hidden power plays than most people realize. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a story of ambition, desperation, and the audacious attempt to build a new world from the ashes of the old. So, buckle up, because we're about to uncover the secret history behind the creation of the United Nations. To truly understand the UN, we have to go back to the smoking ruins of World War I. The war to end all wars had been a catastrophic failure of diplomacy, killing millions and shattering empires. The world was horrified, and leaders were desperate to prevent such a disaster from ever happening again. This desperation gave birth to the League of Nations. Proposed by U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, the League was a revolutionary idea. A global assembly where nations could resolve disputes through dialogue, not warfare. It was a noble dream, a beacon of hope in a traumatized world. But right from the start, the League was built on a shaky foundation. One of the biggest and perhaps most fatal blows came from its own champion. The United States, whose president had conceived the idea, refused to join. The U.S. Senate, wary of being entangled in European conflicts, rejected the treaty. Imagine proposing a global club, and then your own country refuses to sign up. It was a massive political embarrassment, and it severely weakened the League's credibility and power from day one. Without the economic and military might of the United States, the League was like a watchdog with no teeth. As the 1920s gave way to the 1930s, the League's weaknesses became painfully obvious. When Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931, the League condemned the action but did little else. Japan simply quit the League and continued its conquest. When Mussolini's Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, the League imposed some weak economic sanctions that were largely ignored. Italy also walked out. Then came Hitler's aggressive expansion across Europe. Each time, the League proved powerless. It was a talking shop, unable to enforce its own decisions. The dream of collective security had died, and the world spiraled into another, even more devastating global conflict. World War II wasn't just the final nail in the coffin for the League of Nations. It was the brutal, undeniable proof that a new, more robust system was needed. As World War II raged, the leaders of the Allied powers Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin knew they couldn't make the same mistake twice. Even while battles were being fought across the globe, they began secretly planning for the post-war world. This wasn't just about winning the war, it was about winning the peace that would follow. They called themselves the United Nations, a term coined by Roosevelt, initially referring to the alliance fighting against the Axis powers. The name itself was a statement of intent, unity against tyranny. The key difference this time was a commitment to realism over pure idealism. The architects of this new organization understood that power mattered. They knew that any future global body would need the full participation and backing of the world's major powers. This led to a series of high-stakes conferences held in secret locations away from the prying eyes of the press. Places like Dumbarton Oaks in Washington, D.C., and Yalta in the Crimea, these weren't grand public ceremonies. They were intense, closed-door negotiations where the future of the world was being hammered out. At the heart of these discussions was a fundamental and, frankly, controversial idea: the Security Council. Roosevelt, Churchill. Stalin agreed that a special group of great powers should have the primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. These nations, the victors of the war, would have permanent seats on the council. But there was a catch. A feature that remains one of the most debated aspects of the UN to this day: the veto power. Stalin, in particular, was insistent. The Soviet Union had been invaded twice in 30 years and was deeply suspicious of the Western powers. He would not agree to any organization that could take military action against the Soviet Union or its interests without its consent. Roosevelt and Churchill, though perhaps reluctantly, understood this reality. They knew that without the veto, the Soviet Union, and likely the United States as well, would never join. The veto was the price of admission. It was a pragmatic, if undemocratic, compromise. The idea was to ensure the great powers would stay in the organization and work within the system rather than outside of it. They were essentially creating a club where the most powerful members could never be forced to do anything against their will. So while the public face of the UN was one of equality for all nations, the hidden structure was a hierarchy of power. The General Assembly would be the town hall of the world, where every nation, big or small, would have one vote and a voice. But the real power, the ability to authorize sanctions or military force, would lie exclusively with the Security Council and, more specifically, with its 5 permanent members, the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, France, and China. This two-tiered structure was a deliberate design, calculated trade-off between the ideal of sovereign equality and the reality of global power politics. Finally, in the spring of 1945, with the war in Europe over and the war in the Pacific nearing its end, delegates from 50 nations gathered in San Francisco. The mood was one of cautious optimism. The horrors of the war, the Holocaust, and the unprecedented destruction were fresh in everyone's minds. This wasn't just a political exercise, it was a moral imperative. They worked for 2 months, debating, arguing, and refining the charter. Smaller nations fought hard for their voices to be heard, pushing for greater emphasis on human rights, economic development, and decolonization. And then, on June 26, 1945, the charter was signed. It begins with the iconic words, "We the peoples of the United Nations," a powerful statement that this new body was meant to serve humanity, not just governments. But just as the ink was drying, the world was about to change in a way no one could have fully foreseen. Less than 2 months after the charter was signed, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The nuclear age had begun, and it instantly transformed the nature of global security. The UN was created to prevent another world war, but it now faced a world where a single conflict could mean the annihilation of the human race. The birth of the UN, therefore, was not a simple, triumphant moment. It was a messy, complicated process, born out of the ashes of one failure and the crucible of a devastating war. It was built on a grand, idealistic vision, but also on a foundation of cold, hard-nosed pragmatism. Its very structure contains a fundamental tension between the equality of all nations and the special privileges of a few. This hidden history, the failure of the League, the secret negotiations, the controversial veto is essential to understanding the UN's strengths, its weaknesses, and its ongoing struggle to live up to its founding ideals in our complex world. It's a story that is still being written today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this deep dive interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Let me know in the comments what you think about the UN structure. Was the veto a necessary evil? Let's discuss. See you in the next video.